UFC is back in the garden and they are creating a BMF belt just for the occasion. Dan Tom here with MMA Junkie to help you break down the main event for UFC 244 between Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz. This is a great fight. We have Jorge Masvidal, who is a veteran who's kind of having a late career renaissance of sorts, finally putting together those savvy skills that us hardcores have been raving about for years, whether it be his striking, his wrestling, or as we saw in his last fight against Ben Askren, his form of counter wrestling. He is facing a savvy southpaw who is always game to fight a West Coast gangster of his own brand, that is Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz, of course, brother to Nick, also studied Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under the Gracies, has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt of his own, as well as some grappling accolades, and of course, under the care of Richard Perez, has sharpened up his boxing as he throws those jab cross continuums like a coiled cobra. Now, will Nate's call out bear fruit like his last one did? Well, the odds makers in public seem to slightly disagree, favoring Jorge Masvidal at the time of this video, listing him in the neighborhood of your favorite being minus 165, whereas your underdog, the comeback on Nate Diaz, being in the neighborhood of plus 145. My thoughts on the matchup? Well, considering that Nate Diaz has only technically been favored to win 2 out of his last 13 fights using closing lines, I guess you could say I'm not surprised to see him as the underdog here. However, Diaz is a live dog. Despite Masvidal being 6-2 against UFC level southpaws, he's not beyond being stung or even dropped by some of those lengthier southpaws, whether it be Michael Chiesa, Darren Till, or even Tim Means back in the day. So, I believe Nate Diaz's left hand, the punch he makes his money off of, will be live, particularly in those later rounds, as Diaz is more of a slow burn stylist. Also, Masvidal, for all his experience fighting in or out of the cage, he doesn't have the most media experience, and he's had a boatload of media to handle leading up to this. Will he fall into similar trappings like his favorite boxer Roberto Duran did after he defeated Sugar Ray Leonard the first time? We'll have to see. I'm still going to side with Masvidal here. I think he does enough work early, particularly with his underrated leg and body kicks, and he also has wrestling, and I believe the ability to stay out of submissions should he be sober, as in not stung by strikes or exhausted, to stay out of those submissions and kind of win rounds en route to what I see being a 5-round war. Regardless of whether or not you agree with me, keep it locked to MMA Junkie. You know we got you covered from New York City.